And we are live. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and folks of all persuasions. My name is Jack Holder. I am the editor for the Great Commandment Comics Anthology. And this afternoon / late morning, depending on which side of the coast you are, we have with us Mary Zorilita Bellamy, a My Little Pony creator. We are going to be talking about the Great Commandment, her own work, including Ah Heck, and really what it's like trying to be a comic creator, especially in the time of COVID. So we are going to start with that. But first, let's talk about what the Great Commandment is, because what are we talking about? Are we talking about philosophy? Are we talking about comics? Are we talking about new ways to think? A little bit of all of them. The Great Commandment is a comics anthology with over 24 comics answering what commands mean. Now, we have commands that invade every single aspect of our life. We have the very high and noble, you must love your neighbor as yourself. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, to common every day, go to your room, actually do the dishes. Hey, we need to pay our taxes on time, to the funny, lowbrow, and yet completely heartfelt, live long and prosper and be excellent to each other. But what does that all mean? So like we mentioned before, there are over 24 comics in this comics anthology, over 170 pages answering that very question. We have hippos debating about whether life is suffering or really worth it. We have a samurai, Akira, trying to defend his home against foreign invaders. We have angels discussing whether or not faith is really met and achieved. We extend through heaven to the gates of Valhalla, all the way to the atrocities at the southern US border. These comics are done with compassion, work, and amazing, beautiful art. And we have one of the writers and artists here, Mary Zorilita Bellamy. Mary, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your own past work?
Hi, so I am a licensed artist, writer, creator, and I've done like a little bit of everything. I first got started, I wanted to be an animator, but things kind of didn't work out the way I thought, so I ended up doing comic books, anthology specifically, like Manga File, Furlough, Mangazine, where you could write short stories, and I also illustrate them, and you could submit them to a book that had a theme. So Manga File was like books with an anime kind of flavor to them. And from there, I found an invitation online. It's like, hey, do you want to draw Marvel comic characters for these artist sketch cards for Upper Deck? And I was like, sure. So I started drawing those by the thousands. I think I'm over 5,000 at this point. So I've done stuff for Marvel. I've done stuff for Star Wars. I've done stuff for like Steven Universe, Adventure Time, all sorts of stuff. One day I went to a comic book convention, because I go to all of them as a pro, and I put my portfolio to an editor for My Little Pony, and I was hoping, but you know, you never really know when you submit your stuff. I submitted my work, and a year later he's like, hey, you want to do covers for My Little Pony? I'm like, yes. So I've done about 9 covers for them, and it's been really great. I've gotten to meet a lot of fans, a lot of kids. I've been a guest of honor at pony trade shows. Those are a thing. So I got to hobnob with all the directors from the show, voice actors, other artists, storyboard people. All the while, I wanted to keep working in animation, so I had done some stuff for the Drew Carey green screen show. This was like pre-Cintiq days. So the whole premise of that show was it was live action comedy, and we would animate over the top of it. So I was an assistant on that show. I did some stuff for an independent company called Titmouse for a campaign commercial. Never did see it, but it was still cool to work on. And then I did a bunch of animated pitches for people. Like, they would have an idea and they would need an artist to design their characters, so they could go to the studio and say, hey, I have this story, I have all these things. So I would do that, and then meanwhile, I was also writing my own graphic novels behind me. Heck, and Faux Facts, The Truth Can Be Strange, and I've been at San Diego Comic-Con as a seller officially since 2009, but I've been going since 1999. Um, I really like to focus on books for girls that are not about princesses and not about boyfriends and not about the same commercialized stuff that girls are usually inundated with. Nothing wrong with those things, but I was not a girly girl. I wasn't a tomboy, but I was just that kind of oddball, which is why I write about oddball characters in Faux Facts. Which, do you want me to talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Faux Facts is it's a series. It originally was going to be a cartoon, but at the time I was pitching, there was hesitancy about female-led cartoons, so I turned it into a comic. And it's about a group of friends where crazy things happen to them, junk food nightmares, cartoon characters come to life, killer starfish, lizard men invade their town, all because a former friend, out of grief or embarrassment or loneliness, unleashes a chaotic entity upon their city, and it's up to these girls to put an end to it. I'm currently at volume 10, so over 500 pages of story for that one. And then the other series I have is Heck. It's about a girl who winds up in the underworld trying to escape from evil bunnies and killer teddy bears because God turned the underworld into a reform program. Only Angel didn't get the memo and turns all heck upside down, trying to escape and possibly go back to being alive. And that story was based personally with my own struggles with faith and the church and persecution, and just needing an outlet to channel all my feelings about these things, because you don't really see people talk about how they're dealing with stuff directly. It's always kind of metaphoric, and I combined it with the aesthetic of the 80s where we were inundated with scary things in our cartoons, like, you know, Mrs. Brisby trying to escape, and Secret of Nim was kind of scary. I wanted to put like a kind of a ominous backdrop, but to have a positive ending kind of a thing, like, hey, God puts us through heck to get to heaven sometimes. So that was basically the premise of that particular series. It did have a follow-up that brought in the other characters that were in the program within Heck. And it said, you know, how Chastity got there, how Hope got there, and how Faith got there. But I never concluded Faith's story, which is how it ties into this anthology, where I explain Faith's, you know, story. You don't have to read Heck to like my story in this entry, but it helps a lot to give you another layer or two to her background. So basically, those are the comics that I work on. I've done a lot of independent design. I've done just tons and tons of stuff. And up until recently, I didn't realize, hey, by the way, I can call myself a writer because I've been writing these stories this entire time, because people synonymously associate me with my artwork. And it's like, well, yeah, I do both. Because, you know, when people shut doors, you got to open your own window and find where you belong. And sometimes you got to make your own road. So that's what I've been doing for the last decade or two. So that's a little about me and what I've made.
So what we're seeing right now is someone who I think we would call you both an independent and a freelance creator. You've worked with some major companies that people would immediately perk up and go, oh my God, My Little Pony and Marvel and DC and all these really big companies. And at the same time, you're doing your own work that really delves into these bigger questions. Heck, I didn't even know about it. And then for the second book, you're like, I'm going to focus on Faith, and Faith is actually a character, and we're going to really peel back the layers of what it means to have faith in a world that sometimes may feel more painful than hopeful.
Yeah.
And can you talk a little bit about your art style? You've got one of the most unique art styles I've actually seen, and I mean that really much in the compliment factor. We had Angela Audling on last night with Russell Nolte, and we were very much talking about how these sorts of seemingly simplistic, elegant stories really translate themselves and make it a lot easier for people to uh, take the messages and imprint them on themselves as the reader.
Yeah, so my style is influenced by many things. I was very much a child of the 80s. So cartoons were always my thing, like Rainbow Bright, My Little Pony, Care Bears, all that stuff. Video game design, that anime influence that we didn't really know was anime until way later when they're like, by the way, kids, the Ghostbusters is kind of anime like because it was animated in Japan. So hence that kind of connection between American and Japanese stuff. I got into indie comics, and they were comics that were American, but they had influences of other things to it, like anime, like Blue Monday was kind of American, but it was also kind of anime. And so I started to put like the bright colors of the 80s met the bright colors of Japanese anime, but it had cell shading and it had highlights and the overly exaggerated cartooniness of the 80s and anime just kind of melded together. So in the 90s, I was kind of one of those weird people like, hey, you've got some anime influence in your art. And it was kind of actually a turnoff when I would pitch early on because people are like, ew, get that anime out of my story, get that cartoon stuff out of here. And now it's like everywhere. You can't help but see it everywhere. But I really loved the large emotive eyes. Even the 80s cartoons, if you go back, the giant eyes, which give you emotions and feelings, and you can see into the story. It's great when some series have muted colors, but for me, the eye candy really pops, and it gets people to draw you into the character's world when it looks like fiction, but the story reads like reality. So my characters have thematic colors. Um, like Angel from A Heck is green, and in my universe, green is always symbolic of death. So whenever you see someone with green hair or the green background or the green highlights, you're like, who's gonna die right now? You know? And purple is kind of like a character that is asexual who isn't in romantic and situations, and that cool pulled back personality type. So Faith is primarily colored purple because she has cut off her relationships from people. She's pulled back from the world as she sees it. And so I really like to use those contrasting colors to really talk about my story, like who is an active character, who is a background character, and then really just push it. So it seems simplistic and it seems cute, but there's a deeper meaning with the story itself. So you don't want to compete too much, like with having 1,000 details on a character when the whole point is the story.
Precisely. And this is one of the things I actually love about being in the indie comics world is you get every influence has just been thrown into the mixture of reading these comics. You're going to see classic American cartoons, like you will see the influences from Doonesbury, Garfield, Foxtrot, Family Circus, but at the same time, you're going to see anime. You're going to see the '90s super buff superheroes from Image and Marvel. You're going to see European and Italian, specifically styles. And what I love here, you're the first one that really wanted to talk about straight color. And as a writer, very much, unless you're trying to really say almost like Green Lantern, these colors mean something, you're like, let me just let the artist figure out color, because that will probably make things go a lot easier. Is it easier for you because you're for so much of your work you are both writer and artist?
I think in a way it's easier if like I've been writing an actual novel, like a literary novel, so there's kind of that visual element is taken out. So for me doing comics is more natural because I can draw out a thumbnail. I can say this character is feeling cold and distant and everything around them seems fake, so all the colors are drained out or all the thing there's like a shade, like in Ah Heck during Angel's story. everything has this green tint to it when she's in one world, and when she goes to the next world, everything's got a pink tint to it, and when she goes to the next world, everything's got a blue tint to it, and it just sets the scene that you're in different places. And I think being able to show that kind of thing where the colors change to meet the feeling or the mood or the area, it gives your work an extra boost. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily easier. It's just that I came over from the visual side to the creative writing side. So for me, it works a lot easier that way.
Wonderful. Let's jump back into Heck and Have a Little Faith. Why did you choose to focus on faith for this particular anthology? Because we were this was about interpretation and personal drive. How did you go from there to let's go back to Heck?
So basically, the message of the book is how we interpret the orders like that we get. How do we feel? And Faith was one of those characters that I left open-ended because her whole crux of her problem was when she was alive, her mother got very sick. And they were in Victorian times. And she had two sisters, but her mother ends up becoming very ill. And her sisters say, pray, pray, have faith. Have faith that your mom will pull through. So she prays and she prays, and her mom dies. And it breaks her right at that point where she's like, what's the point of having faith if my mom's still dropped dead? You know, and she becomes very anti-spiritualism because in the Victorian era, people were table talking and all that stuff. So she's like, I'm only going to have faith in stuff I can prove, stuff that's written in books, which is ironic because biblical, but you know, I'm only going to have faith in this stuff. And the last point I left her was that she saw Angel escape, but she started to leave, but she didn't even have the faith in herself to think that maybe she could escape Heck. So she pulled back and she watched and she waited until it was too late. And so even Chastity, another character from Heck, even she has a revelation and makes a choice, and things change for her. So Faith was left in Heck alone, and eventually the angels that were in charge of the program, one of them was just like, I can't not feel sorry for this character. I cannot, you know, I have to believe that she deserves some redemption, that she deserves something. I feel like she's changing because she's left there in Heck, in chains, in bondage. And her whole thing was that she realizes believing in her information, believing in books, it hasn't saved her. Nothing has pulled her out of that hole. Nothing logical has worked. So the only thing left is maybe you do need to have a little faith and ask that God pulls you out of that horrible situation. And that's where I came up with the thought to continue her story, because I felt bad about leaving it open-ended, that not everybody got saved from the program, because mostly the program in the original, it was already a failure before Angel got there, and people weren't getting saved, and it wasn't working. And so I wanted to get back into that because I think in these days, faith is so hard to have. We are inundated every day with hell or Heck or whatever, where you see people you care about are dying. You see the economy is garbage. You see people are in pain. You see all these conflicts. And as people, we're drawn to this instinct that we think we can fix things. And sometimes you get to a point you can't do anymore. You can't say, my brain works, here's the solution, we're just going to do it, and it fixes. Sometimes you'll never get an answer, but the only thing you can do is say, you know what? It's not in my hands anymore. All I can do is put it on God and say, if this is meant to get better, I have faith he'll take care of it. And I really wanted to bring that back into this story, and it was the perfect wagon or perfect medium to do it in, because I would never publish a 6-page story anywhere. Like, what are you going to do with that? But this gives me a way to bring people into that world and to show them that having faith is important, and then it can save you from the worst things. And it might not be in the way that you want it to be, but you will be taken to a better place if you just let go of the reins a little bit. You know, after you've done what you can do and there's nothing else, give it to God. And so that's what I really wanted to talk about in this story. So for me, growing up, have faith had a lot of negative connotations because it was dismissive of people who could do something but didn't. But I wanted to turn that around and say, you know what? It's positive to have faith, and it's not, God will never abandon you, even if people do. So I really wanted to put that character out there and put her background up there and to show that it's not always entirely hopeless, because that's what Ah Heck was all about. It was giving people hope in the worst times of their life. Even when you're going through heck, sometimes you got to go through heck to get to heaven. So that was my thought about this entry and why I really wanted to tell the story, because I thought it needed to be told. And I'm also a bit of a method actor because it's been years since I finished the second book for Ah Heck, and now the revelation between that character and this story makes the perfect timing. So I thought that would be a good twist into it.
Talk about perfect timing. When we're talking about having faith in a time that makes things a little bit even more hopeless, while this creation process is going on, a pandemic hits. You were a part of the Why Faith anthology. This next one was triple the size, and if you take into account everything that was probably going on, probably 10 times the external strain that was going on. Did the fact that we were in the midst of this pandemic, did that add more stress, or did it change the creative process for you?
I think I'm that outlier. I'm the weirdo, but I have always been under stress. I've been through some crazy things. I've had enormous amounts of loss in my life. I fought my way out of a wheelchair. I've dealt with just immense things that were crazy and out of this world. So for me, this environment, while it might be crazy hard for other people, I've become kind of numb to the fact that I've been isolated for a long time. So my way of focusing and dealing with things is to just put all those feelings and shove it into my work and put it in there, because nothing gets done and nothing makes you feel better by sitting there and being anxious. Sitting there and worrying won't change your situation. So I figured, you know what? Why don't I put it into something positive? Tell this story that I've been thinking about telling for a while now. It's the perfect medium. It's the perfect message. And I just keep working. I mean, it's like Walt Disney said, keep moving forward. Just keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's all you can do. Is like, I can't stop this virus from killing people. I recently just lost someone. I can't fix the economy, but I can do small things, and that's my power, is to put all my effort into something. And if it can make someone's life a little brighter, and if it can give somebody a little hope, that's what I can do. And it might not seem big in the scheme of things, but you never know. You know, like when you walk up to somebody and they're having a bad, say, hey, how you doing? Hey, you're awesome. And you don't know that that tiny little thing might have saved somebody from going over the edge, you know. So all you can really do is put out something that gives you feelings, or gives other people hope, or puts you in a position to maybe make a little bit of change. When it doesn't seem like it matters, it does. You just might not always see it. So I just figure it's better to focus on what I can do than what I can't do. And that's why I decided to keep working through all of this insanity. It's just the best thing you can do is to keep moving forward.
Precisely. I remember all the jokes from like late night guys that have been like, I've got all this sourdough bread in my house now. I'm like, for the first time since like the 80s or 70s, everyone's actually using their bread makers. Like, I am going to defeat this pandemic not by curing it, but by making sure everyone gets a proper amount of wheat and gluten, and it's going to be delicious at the exact same time. That is what we wanted to do also with things like The Great Commandment. We wanted to tell stories that have meaning, that have purpose, but are also really fun stories. Fun, they're not always going to be positive. They're not always going to, you're going to see things like Mary's work that we are actually going to find the light out of this. And then there are going to be some times when you want to read the depths of despair so you actually can feel like you're not alone. And you're going to see that in the Great Commandment anthology. So you've been a writer, an artist, a freelance commissioned artist, and now you're being a novelist. What tips do you have for people who are trying to submit, they're trying to quote unquote break into this industry?
Start small. Don't go for your magnum opus. Your first work might totally suck. And it's not your fault. And it's not anything to be ashamed of. When I think of the very first Ah Heck that got published in I drew it in 99. I cringed like, oh God, burn it with fire. I didn't know how to do text. Like, I didn't know how to, like, this was back in the day where you'd have to, like, put it in Photoshop 4 with one layer and hope that you didn't mutilate your art. But start small. Start with a short story. Start with something you could tell in like 5 pages. You know, you don't want to do a 1,000-page story because it's really hard to do an overview, because when you're writing, you have to know where you want the story to end. I see a lot of people make the mistake of, oh, I have an idea. There's 4 characters and they're going on a quest, but there's no end goal. There's no, I don't know what's going to happen. No, you got to know that at the end of the story, maybe a character dies, another character finds out that his quest really wasn't about finding an emerald or something. It was actually about finding his identity, or whatever your story is. Have a clear beginning, middle, and end. Don't get married to something. If you find out your story's not working, you can throw it away. You don't have to spend your next 1,000 years working on the same thing if you find it doesn't work. Maybe you could gut your story, take elements that you really liked, and put it in a new story. Part of Ah Heck was taken from my Project Lamb, that was a little defunct entry into Manga File, and I used certain elements of that to bring Ah Heck together to make it a little more cohesive. Try to work out your characters before you draw them, like permanently. Draw 1,000 different versions. Realize that if you're going to put 1,000,000 details in, it's going to take you forever to get that done. Detail is great, and you can save that for covers and pull out illustrations, but you've got to be able to draw your character pretty quickly and from different views. So maybe make it more economical with shapes and forms and such. Don't be married to one format or another. You can draw your stuff completely digitally now. You can draw on an iPad. That wasn't something I could do as a kid. There was no control delete, you know, like delete the file, delete the layer. Now, you know, we had light boxes and you had to redraw the whole thing if you made a mistake. Tons of whiteout. Use the computer. Do Tradigital. My first Ah Heck, I drew it by hand, inked it by hand, scanned it, and colored it digitally. Since then, I went back and I redrew all the pages in Photoshop and cleaned up all the ink, so there's no little dots or anything. Maybe make stock images ahead of time. So if you know your character is going to be in a giant mansion over and over again, maybe make a few sets of illustrations that you can show from different angles. That way you're not wasting your time rendering the same background 1,000 times. Make a set of resources, like say you have wallpaper in a scene. Draw files from that. Make custom brushes. Be willing to step back and say, maybe I'm just going to put this story on pause, because I find when I'm writing one story, another story pops in my head. I'm like, I want to tell this story, but all of a sudden this superhero won't leave me alone. And I'm like, okay, fine. I'll write you. I'll do you right now. And besides all the artistic advice, be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself. People think they're going to start out and be perfect. You're going to make mistakes. Your early stuff's not going to be as good as your later stuff. Take a schedule, balance your life. You don't want that horrible work balance that you're working 16 hours a day and you have no time for yourself. You're not eating right. You're not exercising. Take care of your hands. They are important. Do exercises, get up, stretch your back, walk around the block if it's safe in your neighborhood. Take some time, maybe go see a friend for a while and then come back to it. Nobody ever made something great by destroying themselves. It's not worth dying for your craft. It's supposed to be an extension of yourself, not a replacement of yourself, if that makes any sense. So
yes, it does.
Just keep practicing, keep putting yourself, and you know what? You might even decide, this isn't even for me. I started out wanting to be an animator and I can't see myself wanting to draw that 1,000 times, like a character 1,000 times to make it move. But I do want to tell stories that could be animated. You never know where you're going to end up. Like, I never knew that I was going to be a My Little Pony artist. As a kid, I was like, I had 200 of those things. And I never knew that showing my portfolio one time would get me a job. You just got to go out there, meet people, have some confidence, healthy confidence. You're not perfect, but you should feel good about your skill set and put the best that you can out there. And just be a good person. Don't be a jerk, Be easy to work with. Be compassionate. And if you were going through a hard time, how would someone treat you? How would you want them to treat you? So treat them that way. You're not always going to be everyone's friend. You're not always going to be the right fit. Timing is a huge thing. I've missed a lot of opportunities by that much. And it was kind of like, whatever. But, you just got to keep moving forward. And if it's meant to be, it will be.
Precisely. These are wonderful commandments that you should absolutely follow. If you're a small creator, I really want to echo, as you're starting out, that your work is going to start off sucking. There are too many times that I see in like documentaries or like about the artists or about the writers where people are like, and their greatest work was the first one. I'm like, no, it was not the first one. It was the first one that got published. It was the first one that people accepted. There were many, many, many pieces that preceded that the writer, artist, thankfully buried deep in a hole somewhere. Shorter things work, and I cannot stress this enough. Don't come up with your million-issue character. You shouldn't be trying to create your Superman that is working on issue 1050. That is not a really good idea, because you don't have 75 years and a corporation right behind you. You should be writing, if you are a writer, you should be writing short stories, and you should be working on contained novel ideas, trilogies, quartets. That's what you should be working on, trying to figure out that. And Mary has much better advice about being an artist than I could ever possibly come up with. So we have come to the point which I call the QVC portion, because we are totally selling these books as well. Today we actually hit a wonderful milestone. We hit $3,000 on our Kickstarter with 70 backers. And so if you like what Mary's talking about, if you want to see some more of her work, if you want to maybe even get her first work with me in Why Faith, both The Great Commandment and Why Faith are available in the Kickstarter. In fact, we just released a new reward today. Mary's going to be getting a canvas print of her Aw Heck cover. And beautiful, it's going to look great on your wall. you can actually get that. It is an extremely limited reward, but it's something that you definitely want to get your hands on. Oh. So we know that this is an anthology about personal interpretation, about letting the readers actually take their own meanings and their own ideas from external factors, but we have the creator of Have a Little Faith here. What do you want others to take from this piece, from the anthology, maybe even from this year, Mary?
Okay, so I've always written about hope, and I've always written about having strength. I think that at a personal level, you are the person you want to be, and no matter what's going on around you, you will always be you. You cannot control the world as much as you'd like. Sometimes things come out of nowhere. Just keep trying to be the best person you can be, put that good out into the universe, and eventually it'll come back to you. I really believe that through everything we do, we can affect change, even if we don't see it for like a long, long time. I'll say this, like I've had people come to me at conventions and they're like, oh, your work touched me and it made me feel so great. And I had no idea, because for the most part, people don't talk to you. Like they buy your stuff and they might come back and buy it. And people I never knew, like, oh, this story made me feel so much better. I loved it. You gave me hope. You made me feel something. And I'm like, wow, that's great. And I think that in general, just as hard as it is, try to focus on the positive things. And I'm not saying be fake positive. Feel your feelings. If you're feeling angry, go, I'm angry today. Or if you're sad, cry. It's okay. But generally speaking, you want to try to keep moving forward, keep trying to see the good in everything, because that's really what's going to help you. Just try not to dwell on the bad things, or find ways to creatively cope with it in a healthy way. Just keep making stuff. Just keep reaching out to friends, reaching out to family, because you never know when they won't be there anymore. So tell your friends you love them, tell your family you love them. Just keep it on, I mean, I don't have the world's best advice, but I mean, I think that just being that light can help a lot of people, even, when it's dark.
That is a wonderful way for us to end this. The books are Ah Heck, which you can totally... Where can we find Ah Heck, Mary? Where can we find your...
You can buy it on my web store at zorilita.com, Zorilita.com. I have all my graphic novels, faux facts, volumes 1 through 9. 10 will come out next year because Comic-Con got canceled. All of Ah Heck, the Fallen ones you can get through my website, or you can get the Ah Heck Omnibus on Amazon.com. And you can buy commissions, stickers, all sorts of stuff on my website. And if you just want to look at my personal website, it's marybellamy.com. And you can find me anywhere under Zorilita, like Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you all so much for watching this latest interview. Please keep posting your comments. Please posting your questions. We will try and get to them at a later date. Tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern, I will be interviewing to be or not to be creators, A.A. Rubin and Christina Castro. It's going to be absolutely wonderful. Bees, baseball, and they're the commands that are actually pretty similar between the two. And definitely back the Great Commandment. We are past becoming one of the most successful Kickstarters I've been a part of. And that is all thanks to you, to Mary, and the amazing creators that this is part of. So thank you all so much for watching. Have a blessed rest of your day. Take care, and thank you. Bye.
Bye.